everybody. Welcome to the Hallmarkies podcast. And we're really excited today to bring you a bonus episode. Today, we are talking about the new romantic comedy, Red, White, and Royal Blue. I'm super excited. And with me, I'm film critic Rachel Wagner, and we have Joe from Guy at the Movies podcast. And thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm super excited to talk about this movie.
Is this the first time you've been on the podcast, or did you come on for Christmas?
I think I came on for Christmas. I know we've done on each other's, we've done a few times, so I can't really recall because it's been a few years off and on, but I feel like we both do so many of these that it's like, wait, have I been here before?
And we should say at the beginning, this is a R-rated film. It's a mature film. So if that is not your jam, then you'll want to check out one of the other podcasts that we do this week. So mature content warning at the beginning. But yeah, I was super excited about this movie. I was low-key obsessed with the trailer. I probably watched it 50 times. I'm not kidding. I loved the trailer. So I had high hopes going into it, and I had read the book. So what was your feelings, I guess, about the movie going into it?
I was extremely nervous, Rachel. I mean, I had read the book years ago and have such fond memories of it being a page turner and enjoying every moment of it. We'll talk about why I think the story is great.
Yeah.
But I was nervous going in, and then the trailer, I was like, oh, I really like this trailer, but is this biased because I'm excited for it? And we'll see how it shakes out. Anyone can make a good trailer. But yeah, I remember even when it started, I was like, all right, here we go. What are we about to get here?
Yeah.
But we'll talk about how I'm pleasantly surprised and happy.
So you were lucky you got to see it at a screening.
Yeah.
Oh,
So I was pushing for press for this, honestly. I was, Guy at the Movies is expanding, and I've been pushing for certain things, especially when it falls into the LGBTQ realm, personal interest of mine as well. Sure. And of course, we were moving that direction, and then the strike happened. The actors' strike happened. So they invited me to a screening in New York the day, a couple hours before the social embargo lifted. So I was super excited to go up and see it on a big screen and not have any distractions, because I struggle a lot watching movies at home. But this, it was a fun outing.
Well, I'm so jealous. I wish I could have seen it on a big screen, but the advantage, I guess, of getting the screener link is I could like rewatch certain scenes like over and over. So that was good.
Yes.
Yeah, I had read the book just to get it ready for the movie. Once I saw the trailer and I was obsessed with it, I was like, I better read this book. And I think I'd heard about it. But I hadn't, read it, and I loved the book. And I would say in general, this stays pretty close to the book. There's
I would agree with that.
One big change that we'll talk about, but for the most part, it's pretty accurate. You can tell they had the writer, Casey McQuiston, in the writer's team for the movie.
And also in a scene of the movie, did you catch her?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Near the end, when there's when Uma Thurman's character, the president, is, they think, writing a concession speech. The speech writer who's kind of on the ground writing is the author.
I mean, they do have a lot more politics in the book, which I think that was also a good change. I mean, that they had just enough for this. You didn't need more.
It's tough adapting any book. I mean, it's kind of the Harry Potter effect, where there's so many subplots happening, right? And when the movies came out, people were like, well, what about, the elf union or whatever it was, that Hermione starts in the books. But there's certain things they had to streamline here. We'll talk about it probably with a character that's missing in the translation as well. But it worked. Everything they did worked very well for me, to the point where I recognized what was different and then accepted it and moved on. And
there was really only one big change that I kind of question, and we'll talk about. But in the end, I was fine with it. But if people don't know, the plot for this story is when the son of the American president and Britain's prince, public feud threatens to drive a wedge in U.S.-British relations, the two are forced into a staged truce that sparks something deeper. And this is directed by Matthew Lopez. It's written by Casey McQuiston, Matthew Lopez, Ted Malawar, and it stars Sis Gownstein and Taylor Zacher Perez in our leads, and it has Sarah Shahi and Uma Thurman. And so overall, what was your overall response to the film? What did you think?
I loved it. I was very emotional during it in a lot of ways. I think part of it was I was just excited that it was delivering what I remembered feeling from reading the book. But also it was fun. It was funny. It was sexy, if you will. It was the chemistry between the leads, which if they didn't get that right, the whole movie would have failed for me, and they knocked it out of the park. But then it hits those emotional beats of exploration of sort of, you know, individuality, kind of what they wanted from life, and where they found themselves in the spotlight, and, you know, tradition in Britain versus politics in the US. And I loved it. I like teared up at the end. At one point, I think I like openly sobbed, and I was like, oh no, am I the only one sobbing? And then this woman that was right down the row from me, like, kind of did like a like that, and I was like, okay, we're good, we're in good shape here.
Yes.
But yeah, I loved it. I thought every aspect, the direction I thought was fantastic. The way that they incorporated things from the book, like, you know, the book has a lot of the emails listed out, and you know, different, playing with time a little bit in terms of how they're emailing back and forth and communicating and texting. And they do a really great job in this movie. Matthew Lopez does, with sort of playing with, you know, they're communicating to each other by phone and by email, but, you know, they show Henry in the bed when he's not really there, but it was just creative. And I loved it. We'll get into specifics, but I just absolutely love this movie.
Ho, ho, ho. We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies Patreon.
Do you love Hallmarkies podcast, especially at Christmas?
Do you enjoy the holiday previews, recaps, interviews, and bonus episodes?
If the answer is yes, please consider supporting the Hallmarkies Patreon. We need your help to do what we do both during the Christmas season and all year round.
But not only do you help a podcast led by strong, independent women by becoming a Patreon, you get to become a part of the Hallmarkies family.
Starting at only $2 a month as a patron, you will have access to our Facebook Patreon group where we talk about the movies, shows, and more all year.
We also have many monthly patron watch-alongs with guests like Lacey Chabert, Natalie Hall, Paul Campbell, Mary Lou Henner, and more, giving their behind-the-scenes details of their films.
As a patron, you also have the chance to provide input into the podcast and even join us at different tiers.
So this Christmas season, spread some cheer to the Hallmarkies Patreon and become a member today. You won't regret it.
Go to patreon.com/Hallmarkies to learn more.
That's patreon.com/Hallmarkies.
I really loved this film as well. I after I finished watching it, I said to myself, is this my favorite movie of 2023? I really did. And
I'm with you.
It's interesting because, you know, I cover rom-coms for a living. So you think that I would have removed any of that genre bias that you see so often. But even me, I have kind of a moment where I'm like, can I really say it's my favorite movie of the year? It's just, even me, because I say it's just a silly rom-com. But when I think about it, every element except for Uma Thurman's accent was perfect. I wouldn't change anything. I mean, it was, I just feel like almost anything I'd be like supreme nitpicking. If there's something to be said for that if that a movie knows its genre and executes it super well, and it's a genre I love. I mean, I feel like if you don't at least say like that was a fun movie, you just don't like this genre, and there's no hope for you.
I was most nervous about how you would respond to this movie, after you had asked me to do this, and we had talked about recording together. I was so nervous because I know that you watch these on a regular basis. This is your wheelhouse.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh no, Rachel's going to see things but possibly I won't see, and what's going to happen. So when you texted me yesterday saying how happy you were with it, I was like, thank you.
No, that is an interesting thing, because I do think I am probably in a way pickier.
Sure.
Because I have seen so many, that I think about it all the time with the Hallmark movies, that, that I'll watch one and I think probably like 99.9% of people would be like, oh, that was a Hallmark movie. That was a fun movie. And I would be like, oh, they did this wrong. And they did this wrong. because I have seen, so many, and I am a critic, and that's my job to be a critic.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I still like a lot of them, but I don't know. I do think I was actually thinking about that also, because I saw the national touring company of Les Mis, and Les Mis was the first musical I ever really loved. It was one of like the foundation media of my growing up. It was really important to me, and so I love it. And you'll never hear me saying that a production of Les Mis was bad ever, just because I love it so much. But I think about 99% of the people in the audience were like, that was amazing. And then I was like,
I get that.
Because I didn't really like the way it was staged, and it was so bizarre. They had empty chairs and empty tables. They had no chairs, no tables, and they had these like balls of light, and then they had the people that had died come up and hold the balls of light. And I was like, what is this weird
a modern interpretive version of it.
Yeah. Like, what?
Wow.
So I didn't care for that, but I don't know. That's funny that you were on pins and needles about it, because I do think there's some truth to that I can be the most forgiving critic of rom-coms, but also the
Well, and then it's also tough when you love a movie so much, the last thing you want to hear is someone say, didn't like it. And so it's funny, when I really love a movie, my podcast partner, Sean, I'm always like, oh no, what's he do? So now I'm on pins and needles waiting for him to watch it.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with that. But if I may, I think I'm similar with the way that I approach LGBTQ movies. Is I always want to love them because I want more of them. I want more representation. I want them done well. And what I really love about Red, White, and Royal Blue, how they handle this movie, and it's the core story that does this.
Yeah.
It's not one of those movies like exploring your identity and then relating it back to trauma as a child, and the negativity and all of that, and kind of like by the end you're like powering through. This is a romance. It is a good, solid romance that has humor, that has sexiness, that has deep conversations. And has good interactions with supportive parents. The common trope of, who am I? I don't know who I am. I don't want to come out. And then you come out to your parents and one of them doesn't accept you, the other does. This was very like just supportive and, surface level in some of those ways, but I think it was a nice change of pace.
Yeah. I think what was so smart about the story is that I think in 2023, it's harder to create a narrative where somebody isn't at least mostly embraced for their, for who they are as an LGBTQ person, but to having him be a prince and having him be part of this, old aristocracy system, I think that feels believable. It feels, and
absolutely.
So you're able to kind of structure the narrative in such a satisfying way and make the characters' choices feel believable. That, I mean, not that there aren't lots of people that aren't accepting, unfortunately, of LGBTQ individuals, but I don't know. I just think that helps like steep Henry's perspective in tradition just very effortlessly.
Yeah, I agree,
So
and
it
also kind of begs exploration of the history of the monarchy and history of politics, because there's a lot of research out there, and I read a book recently that dives into a lot of this about LGBTQ individuals throughout history, and their influences within administrations at times where they weren't coming out.
Yeah.
And so, like, Henry, let's treat Henry as a real individual here, right?
Sure.
Henry isn't the first to struggle with this in the monarchy, but it's just interesting to see it depicted here and then have that thought process about what does that really look like? What if that did happen in reality? And I kind of love that. It's a different, it's a simplistic, fun take, but it's also a very interesting, possibly real take.
Yeah, and that is something they do a little bit more of in the book. Is he goes into, I can't remember the kings and whatever, and he shows them in the gallery. So the scene in the book, he shows them some king, and it's like, oh, this guy had like an official base, I forget what they called it, but he had an official male attendant that was his thing, like everyone knew. And, which is really interesting and funny the way it's done. And so we start out with a pretty iconic scene from the book with this royal wedding, and I guess if you were gonna say which character is sort of your stuffy Brit cliche, it would be Philip, the brother.
Absolutely.
No, he's pretty bad.
All the way through the end.
Yes. And it's interesting that they cast Stephen Fry as the grandfather, as the king, because he's gay, which I just thought must have been kind of funny for him to play this, this role. But it was interesting to have him in that role. But yeah, this royal wedding, and they start, arguing back and forth. And they end up with this giant cake all over them. And it's a pretty good start to your enemies to lovers story.
Yeah,
to have this kind of public, thing. And
it is a little silly.
It is silly.
But it's silly in the book, and I kind of like that they got it out of the way right away.
Yeah. He says that Henry's the world's most irritating person.
There's a lot of great one-liners in this.
Yeah. Well, and it's more believable because they both get, like, especially Alex gets totally sloshed. So like it's more believable that and he gets this little bit of frosting, and then it gets bigger and bigger, and he throws then they fight. And so then we get to see the president of the United States, played by Uma Thurman. And why did they pick her? Like, why not just pick somebody who has a convincing Texas accent? It was totally stupid. No, not needed. Why? There's so many actors who can do a good accent. I don't understand why they picked her.
Accents usually bother me. I have to admit, this one didn't really bother me. Probably because she didn't have too much to do in this.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess. It's just like, why her? Like, is she that big of a draw? Like, I don't know. Just anybody that has like an actual good accent. That was like the most obvious flaw to me of the film. It wasn't a deal breaker at all, but I was just like, she sounds terrible.
It was interesting casting, not only with her, and you mentioned Stephen Fry already, but then you have Clifton Collins Jr. as the father. And Clifton Collins Jr. is one of those actors that pops up in absolutely everything.
Yeah.
He's just always like, oh, and Clifton Collins Jr. is there. But it was somewhat refreshing to see him in a movie like this, and some of the scenes that he has with, in particular, Nicholas Galitzine and later Henry, later on, and also, of course, his son in this. I really liked his delivery. So it's funny because they're not like major A-list stars anymore, but I think they're draws isn't the right word. They're recognizable enough to, I think, lend a little bit of their credibility to the film.
Yeah, it was a great cast. I mean, then we get to meet, like, a little bit later, we meet Sarah Shahi, who I love. She's so good, and she was great in this as Zara.
She nailed the character.
Yeah,
she nailed it.
Yeah, so good. And then Rachel Hilson as Nora, also I thought great, really good.
She was very, very good. It's interesting with that character. There's a character that's missing from the movie that's in the book, and that's
Mm-hmm.
June, one of the other
Mm-hmm.
friends.
Mm-hmm.
And June, I think they kind of took some of her characteristics and threw them into Nora as well. And it makes sense. You know, it's funny. I put up a reaction to this after I saw it on TikTok. And of all the movies, Rachel, big releases, Marvel movies, whatever, you know, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Barbie, Oppenheimer. This one is by far and away my best performing video ever.
Yeah.
And
I think because there's not a lot of people reacting to it. They actually told me I couldn't do a social reaction until the embargo lift. They said only the people that were able to go to the live screenings were able to do. So I think that's part of the reason why. But hopefully there's big hype for this because it deserves it.
Well, and it's interesting because I'm realizing how much of a following the book had, and that's really cool to see.
Yeah.
But one of the questions they keep asking, and I'm not answering them yet because I don't want to get too the embargo hasn't lifted, but it's about June, and a lot of them are saying, "Is June? You know, where's June? I can't believe they left her out." And then someone said they probably took her characteristics and put her into another character, which I think they did a little bit. But it's also back to what we started with. When you're adapting a book, there are certain things that need to go, and you can't have 80 million characters that you have to balance. Otherwise that takes away from the main story and creates problems with pacing. And I don't think they have that here because of the decisions they made.
Yeah, I actually, we were just talking about that with Oppenheimer, because I feel like that's a movie where it could have benefited from combining, many true stories, histories. That's what they'll do. They'll kind of combine 3 or 4 characters in real life into making them into one character. And I think that movie actually could have benefited from that because there were some, like when they say, oh, this British guy was like a spy, I was like, who did we even meet him? Like, what?
Who is this person?
Yeah. They could have benefited from combining a few people together and it would have been fine. But yeah, you have to streamline, and especially when it's a pretty short movie like this. Is how long? I guess it's 2 hours. Pretty long for a rom-com. But anyway, you have to merge the two together, and you just can't include everything. A pretty close job. They did add one character, this reporter guy.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and so I guess we could talk about that because so they decide, in the biggest change from the book to the movie is they decide to give Alex experience with men, particularly this reporter that he had made out with in the campaign. And I guess that's okay. I don't know. I think it's kind of almost more interesting in the book for him to be completely like, wow, I did not see that coming, like in any way, shape, or form. And here it's more like, I did not see that coming because of Henry more. So yeah, that was it. What did you think of that change?
So it's funny because I didn't even realize it until you said something, honestly. And because it's so subtle. And I think part of that, if I was, to engage in conjecture here, I think it's probably because they would have to spend more time with those feelings and dive deeper into them when it's the first interaction. Not only is it your first same-sex interaction like that, but it's Prince of England. They're 2 pretty heavy things to unpack. So let's eliminate one of them and just unpack the fact that you just, locked lips with a Prince of England. Yeah. So I get it, because I think that's also one thing that could have brought the film down and messed with tone and pacing. But it's still faithful in that it explores this character, and it explores both of their feelings and how, this interaction, this romance is going to impact their lives. It just doesn't get into some of those especially that big one, that big side history.
Yeah. And I think there maybe was like a tiny bit of attempt to give some form of competition for Harry, that there's this other potential. They never really do that much with it, but I kind of want, maybe if that was also a reason. And they kind of use it as a scapegoat for the outing
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
It's the scapegoat. I think that was probably the truest intent, was to give a little bit more meat behind why were the emails hacked and released. And this guy had questionable intent.
Yeah. So what did you think about our two leads, Nicholas Galantine and Taylor Zachar Perez? Did you think they had good chemistry, or how did you feel?
I said this to you before. I think I was most concerned about their chemistry. There were a lot of people that were saying in the trailer it looked like they didn't have chemistry, which I didn't see from the beginning, but I thought their chemistry was off the charts in this. They're very believable as a couple. They're very believable in not only the more intimate scenes, but when they are having the conversations about what they're feeling and, the histories of their families and the realities of American politics and, the royals. Yeah. So I love them. I think they're both charming actors. They played off of one another very well. When they want you to identify, to empathize with them and be, emotional and sad, they get you there. When they're having fun at a bar in Texas and taking shots and, Henry singing, you're laughing, you're smiling. They definitely evoked every aspect of this story through their performances. And I loved them. I absolutely love them. I only wish that there wasn't, obviously for a lot of reasons, I wish there wasn't an actor strike, and I wish them the best in getting what they need. But I would have loved to see them more on the publicity trail. They've done some pre-canned things, but they're just charming. And I think that they would build on the actors themselves would build on the momentum that this has socially right now, with the first reactions being so positive, and be able to then to entice others to see the film who may not have seen it otherwise, because it is a very, very good film.
Yeah, I completely agree. I thought they just sizzled, and the book is very spicy. Like we gave the mature warning at the beginning. It is very spicy, and this movie is spicy. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, definitely get spicy, Rachel. The one thing I was thinking about this morning, though, is, and this is back to sort of why I think this is such a unique film for LGBTQ audiences. It's spicy, but in a way that you would expect from any other rom-com. And when I say any other, I mean like a straight rom-com or anything. It's so many times when you get, gay programming, it's either exclusively like a PG story, or it's the complete opposite, where it's like smut in a way. And this plays it tastefully down the middle. I mean, they don't show you everything that's happening, but they heavily imply it. It is an intimate film, but I think it's balanced so well in a way that it doesn't distract from the rest of the aspects of the film and everything else it's accomplishing.
I'd agree. I totally agree. And they do such a fun job with the enemies to lovers. Like I said, we've got this cake scene, and then we've got them trying to be friends for the in this publicity thing at the beginning, which is just so well done. And you've got this back and forth that Alex describes Henry as being white, blonde, and British. and then he says, one thing I really admire about Alex is his willingness to admit when he's wrong. And there's being covered in cake happens all the time in the palace. And Queen Victoria having food fights all the time. And then Alex and Vicky, she's a classic. That was really good. All that back. The banter was so well done.
Yes. And it carried over from the book well. I mean, they were able to keep that spirit, which I thought was great.
Yeah. And like I said, I loved Sarah Shahi in this. She was really funny, and it was believable when she's so shocked later that when she finds Henry there in the hotel room, she's just like, what? Because she had dealt with him complaining about Henry early on.
She was great.
Yeah, I was so irritated. I was irritated with Black Adam. I was very irritated with Black Adam because she was so underused in that film, and she's so good. It's like,
it's, if anything comes of this movie, which I hope a lot comes from it, I think her performance here shows how solid she can be. and her, just her comedic timing was on point. I loved her.
Yeah, I would, because her and Adam Demos are dating in real life. Oh, more of them, please. I couldn't believe that that he was in I think it was called The Perfect Pairing.
Okay.
And that was terrible movie. And they have Adam Demos, and he has long sleeves on almost the whole movie. You're just like, what is wrong with you? Like, do you think we're watching The Perfect Pairing for the intellectual discourse? Like,
did not get the memo on that.
There's a really iconic scene in the book that is in this where they're sitting together for this interview, and the reporter's like, can you scooch closer, scooch again, scooch again.
Yep.
And that was really fun. That was a funny scene. I enjoyed that. We'd like to take a second and celebrate our sponsor of this episode of the podcast, Baker Bookhouse Publishing, and 3 of the recent releases that will be a perfect end to your summer reading fun. First up, The Secret to Happiness by Suzanne Woods Fisher. Callie Dixon sets her goals and reaches them. So how did this executive chef end up in a small ice cream shop on Cape Cod, sharing a room with her cousin and refusing to set foot in the kitchen? It will take the charm of a young boy and his quiet, steady father to help her find the answers and maybe the secret to happiness. Second, With Every Memory by Janine Roche. After a tragic accident robs her of the last 9 years of memories, Lori Mendenhall comes home to a family completely different than she remembers. As her memory returns and past secrets resurface, it will take all of them to repair what's been broken and find a new future together. Finally, Summer in the Spotlight by Liz Johnson. After a devastating hurricane on Prince Edward Island, Kelsey Ahern sets out to save her beloved community theater and her job. As she draws her friend Levi Ross into her plans for a benefit show, she discovers there's more to him than she expected, and that God's plan for their future are so much more important than the struggles of their past. You can pick up any of these books for 30% off at bakerbookhouse.com or use the affiliate link below. That's bakerbookhouse.com. Okay, so then we have this whole scene where they get pushed into this closet. There's a firework that goes, I think it's a gun. They push them into the closet, and they're all entangled together. This is really, I thought, emblematic of how good this movie is, because you have this you've got the physical comedy, you've got the forced proximity to each other, got all those romantic elements, but you also have this very tender scene where you talk about the first time they met and why Henry was so rude to him because his father had just died, and why that hurt Alex so much, because this was his first public event as a public figure, and he could have really used some help from Henry. And so it just, I thought it was a really good example of how they balance everything so well in the film.
I think it disarmed both of them too, because up until that point, you have Henry as the stuck-up British guy, British heir to the throne. Well, distant heir to the throne. And then you have Alex as kind of like the cocky American. But that scene, you're right, completely disarms both of them, and they both are honest. And that, I think, is the first turning point in this film.
And he says, I could have been nicer.
Yeah.
And so that was really good. And
touches my heart.
Yeah. And so then they start this texting thing. And you're right. They really did a great job of bringing those, because to be honest, most of those parts of the book, I'm like, let's get through with this, because it's just not that interesting to me. But they brought in some of their personality with gifts, and it was cute. It was fun, flirty. It added something, I thought.
It pushed the story forward, and they did it quick. They did it quickly and believably,
So it's all building up to this New Year's party, and they have all this dancing, and they're kind of getting, they're all getting sloshed once again, and Alex is trying to get Henry on the dance floor, and I thought almost even more than the kiss, which is coming, which was perfect. They have this moment where the music stops, and they are kind of above there everybody else. And so it just focuses on these two people looking at each other. And I thought that was like rom-com gold.
Yeah, it was
So
great.
good.
Matthew Lopez as the director here just
Yeah.
hit every beat very well
Yeah.
and made it unique. It wasn't a cookie cutter adaptation in that, like, okay, let's do this scene, let's do that scene, whatever. But you're delivering the story through a different medium, and he uses everything at his disposal, all the tools there to present unique ways to show what's happening with these two individuals, even when they're not even talking in that scene. They're just distantly apart from one another, as everyone, I think the song was Get Low at that point, maybe, but everyone's like down on the ground and they're just looking at one another, and
it's so good. I
it is
love
so
it.
good.
And so then we get this scene out and that's very iconic in the outside of the White House. That's very iconic in the book, and where Henry says, "Do you ever wonder who you would be if you were just an anonymous person in the world?" And he says, I was an anonymous person, and then my mom decided to be president. And then he says, well, what would you be? I would be a writer, and I would date whoever I wanted. And Alex says, oh, you're the prince, you can date whoever you want. And he says, the people I date don't interest me, and the people I'm interested in, I can't date. And Alex says, I don't know what you're talking about. And then we get this amazing kiss. It was so good. Oh,
yeah.
I loved
That
it.
Dialogue there is that writing is just exquisite. And again, without those two performers and without the way the film has been presented thus far up into this point, it could have come across as very corny, but it hits every beat. Yeah,
that's the tricky part with, there's a lot of things that are underrated in their difficulty with a rom-com, because the exact same stuff can, if you're not feeling the chemistry, which is totally out of anybody's control, people just have chemistry or they don't. Like you can have on paper be like, these two people should be great. Like even people that are married, sometimes on screen they have terrible chemistry. You think, because people that are married oftentimes are so relaxed that like, isn't quite there on screen. I've seen it many, many times. But in this case, they had such great chemistry. And so that they nailed. But I don't know, there's something about, like you're saying, with the corniness, that all romance is corny. Like all of it. If you hear anybody tell their story, you're like, oh, that was cheesy. It's just part of romance. And so it's a tricky thing to make feel authentic to the characters. And I think in this scene, it is corny. It totally feels authentic to these characters.
Agreed.
And they've earned it with everything. And so it was so good. And then I love the fact that they have this whole conversation after with Nora and Alex. And her basically giving him the 411 on his feelings for Henry. It was so good. It really helped, like, with his character and building the romance. He says he grabbed my hair in a way that made me understand the difference between rugby and football.
That is just great writing.
That's so good.
And like, again, I don't want to lose sight of the fact that Casey McQuiston was able to weave this story together in the book with this 1000% accurate, transmittable writing. I mean, this is the writing. Some of these lines are verbatim from the book. And they're just delivered so well.
It's so true. And then we have and then he also kind of learns a little bit in this conversation about Henry, because he is pretty stupid about that she's like, oh honey, princes aren't allowed to be gay. Like, oh, okay.
There was a show that explored this a little bit back in the day. Oh my gosh, I'm trying to remember when it was on. I want to say 2010 for some reason, but it was called Kings. Do you remember this? It was on NBC.
I didn't watch it, like most television shows.
So it was about 10 episodes. Ian McShane led it. Macaulay Culkin was in it. But Sebastian Stan played the son of the king. who was, heir to the throne, but was out partying and all this and was gay.
Mhm.
And there was a lot of discussion about, his lifestyle, quote unquote,
Right.
and how that would impact the monarchy. And it was a modern day monarchy in what would be like the United States. Like, what if New York, the equivalent of New York, was like the capital, and it was like one guy ruling over everything, but it was also very biblical.
Oh.
And so NBC had no idea how to market it, which is why it never took off. But it's a fantastic show, but they have explored this idea of, a non-straight identifying individual in the monarchy before. And of course we didn't get a payoff because the show got canceled. But with this, I was really excited to see them diving into that conversation.
Yeah. It's like I said, it worked so well because I think it's one of the, I mean, without getting into like true hate, like it's one of the last sort of like bastions of sort of traditional culture where closeting would make sense, like, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like we've come, maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like we've come a long way on that, and that it makes it so easy to put Henry in this position.
Yeah.
Because of that. So
I agree.
It works for the structure.
I think in reality, the royals are trying to hold on to tradition and are already the beacon for how many different attacks and criticisms on their status, that this is just one other piece of it that they probably don't want to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, it is interesting that if there was a younger person in the royal family who was gay, I kind of don't think it would be a problem.
Nope.
I don't. I mean, I what do I know? But I mean, it's just been, gay marriage has been legal in Great Britain for so long that I think they would just have to get married. Congrats, they're getting married. I don't know, maybe.
If only things were that simple, Rachel.
Yeah. Our UK listeners, please pipe in. We want to hear. So then we have this great scene where he wants to talk to Henry about all of this, and it is so good in the book, this part. He's just like, I can't stop thinking about that kiss. This whole scene in the Red Room, and this is where the security with I forget her name, but she was funny. She was
good in this.
Yeah. And so she's like, I can give you the Red Room for like 2 minutes.
Which is also a big moment in the book, and a lot of the comments that I've received on my reaction has been, is the Red Room in there?
Yeah, because Henry thinks that he like offended Alex, by the kiss, and he doesn't realize. And I thought that this was some great acting, because so Henry comes in and he's like, I'm so sorry, I behaved abominably, and Alex says, shut up and stop talking. And what I loved is, so he kisses Henry, and then it stops. He stops it for just a second, and he's like, oh, like, you actually like me back. Like, this is happening. Like, he can't believe it. Which I thought that he did an excellent job acting in that scene. Nicholas was really good. That you could feel like, oh my gosh, like my dreams are coming true.
And you see that switch happening. Like, you can almost visualize it in the head, like, oh wait.
That was so good. Really good. And then they get stopped, and that was also very funny, because they're just like pretending to look at the books and stuff.
Yeah.
And then so he's like, come and meet me at the residence at midnight. And so then we get this scene, their first love scene, which was great. And Alex says, I'm a bisexual, which I liked that they went that way for his character.
Yep.
I think that's always good. And then Henry says, I'm as gay as a maypole. That's really funny.
The reaction is the best, though.
Yeah.
And I love that. It's just still them, it's still them. it reminds viewers that while they're coming together, they're still so far apart on so many things.
Yeah. Well, and then he says, I just can't afford for you to fall in love with me, which was brilliant rom-com writing, because of course it is Alex who falls first and hardest. And so it's kind of giving you a little hint, and they're like, again, banter. Absolutely really great.
As we're talking, I'm like Googling Blu-ray release for Red, White, and Royal.
Yes.
When can I pre-order?
Yes. So then we get like, there's like a polo scene, which was very sexy in the book. He talks about, and it's sexy here, but even more in the book. And they talk about their names, and he says, I thought Alexander Gabriel Claremont Diaz was a mouthful. And then this was probably one of the raunchier lines, but then Henry says he is a mouthful.
Yeah. But it's just, again, wonderful writing.
Yeah, it was really good.
I was like, oh.
Yeah. And so then we start to get like Henry talking about how like Prince Henry belongs to England, Henry Fox has to belong to himself, and Alex is like, that's BS, like what's going on. And so we started building that tension, and I thought that Nicholas did such a good job of like showing the pain of his life.
He had the bigger lift here when it came to, I think, the emotional underpinnings of everything that was going on. I mean, there's not only the royal family, but his internalizing of all that, and now he finally has a chance to lay it bare. And just seeing that happen, I think Nicholas Gallatin really, really delivered there in a believable and authentic way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So then we have the biggest love scene in the movie, and I went to English boarding school. Trust me, you're in good hands.
Yeah.
But I like the fact that that was the most vulnerable moment for Alex, because he had to admit that he'd never been in a relationship like this. And he's just kind of like, I don't know.
He's just learning as he goes.
Yeah. He's like, I'm so not cool. But it just endears you to the characters, because you're like, oh, okay, he's not like perfect. He's not some paragon of virtue. Like it's very endearing. And so then we have more of him and like his Texas strategy, and I think it was probably unrealistic to pin like the entire presidential race on Texas. And we're not there yet.
No,
I mean, not even. So that was the biggest like fantasy of this movie was, in this book, is it's not there yet.
Well, I think that's going to be a snapshot in time that we'll see how it ages in a decade or so, because politically Texas has a lot of blue pockets and has been moving that direction. So I think Casey McQuiston plays with that in the book here and finds an interesting angle to base the history of, or I guess the background of the president in Texas and the first family from Texas. So what would happen there? So I agree with you. I mean, to say that that grassroots movement is what swings everything for the president, it's definitely a pipe dream there, and probably unrealistic in a hyper partisan country like we are at this point. But I don't know, there's something about it that I think just adds to the charm and the idyllic way with which Alex looks at the world. Not only with oh, we can flip Texas and here's how I think we can do it, but that translates also to how he's interacting with Henry and saying why, like challenge the history there, challenge what box you've been put into. And it just shows more about Alex's character that I think is pretty remarkable.
Yeah. I mean, he was super charming. You're like, okay, this guy could do well in politics. He was very charming. He was very good. And then this is when I mean, there was a very swoon-worthy line when Henry goes to see him when he's working in Texas on the campaign, and he says, "When we are apart, your body comes back to me in my dreams."
Such good lines.
That's a good line.
I see T-shirts. I see coffee mugs.
Yeah.
I will make them.
And this is the best scene for Zara. She storms in and
where is she?
Yeah, it was so good. When she sees Henry in the closet, like actual literal closet, and that was so funny. It was great.
Can we talk about the symbolism there too? I mean, that's
I didn't even think of that until they said it, the words out of my mouth, and I'm like, oh yeah.
It's funny because it's not so subtle, but I guess maybe it is, because I don't like, he's hiding in the closet, and that's the first real time. I mean, aside from the Secret Service detail, but it's the first time that like someone with impactful, ability to say something or be vocal about this and out them, sees him out of the closet, and it's just good writing. I keep going back to it.
Good morning. And I also loved in that scene when he's like, I did tell my sister.
She's like, hello.
Yes, that's why it's so important that we be allies and we support each other.
We'd like to take a second and thank our sponsor for this episode of the podcast. It's the Hallmarkies merch store.
Are you looking for that perfect gift for the postable, Hardy, or Hallmarky in your life?
What about getting that t-shirt or hoodie that will help you stand out at your next holiday party?
Now is the time to check out the Hallmarkies merch store.
Full of festive designs by artists like Jessica Miller, Carrie from Hallmark Comics, and more.
You can even have more than just shirts, but totes, cell phone cases, notebooks, mugs, and more.
And it isn't just Hallmark. We have designs for Anna Green Gables, Man from Snowy River, The Nanny, and more.
Every purchase at the merch store goes to help support the podcast and allows us to make the great content you know and love.
There are frequent sales, so go to tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies or see the link in the description.
That's tpublic.com/stores/Hallmarkies.
We have him telling his mom, coming up to his mom, which was very sweet. Mm-hmm. And she says, despite the absolute terrible accent, you need to figure out if you feel forever about him. And it was very sweet. Like ideal, supportive, funny, well done.
Yeah. I think some criticism probably will be from some people who may not have had that reality in coming out, who will look at that and say, oh, that's just idealizing everything. But I think that's okay in a movie like this. I mean, this isn't a movie that's diving deep into those issues that would open a whole nother can of worms. Mm-hmm. And I think that just as much as we want to see representation of realistic conversations where things don't go well, and it's good to see conversations where they do, and that there should be a good balance of that. And this is part of that.
That it's believable that a Democratic president would be pretty supportive of her, gay son. It doesn't, I mean, if anything, it feels a little bit hard to believe that there would literally be crowds outside Buckingham Palace cheering on. That's the fantasy.
I don't know,
but I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I mean,
our UK listeners, please pipe in.
Yeah, who knows? I mean, just think about like in this country too, like in the US, think about like the young generations and how I talk to my mother about this all the time. She always says like young kids today are just so much more open to and accepting to like, the things that we're fighting about on a regular basis. And I wonder like what that support would look like.
Yeah.
I love it.
I mean, it was a journey for me, to be honest. I mean, I grew up in a faith that still to this day is not accepting, and it wasn't until my sister came out, and so that was obviously very eye-opening. But also, I had a particular friend who came to me when he was wanting to come out to his parents, who were very religious, and he wanted advice on what he should do, what he should say. And I just realized that I needed to be the person that I was saying. I needed to be the person that I wanted him to experience, like I wanted him to be loved so much. And it was like, it was hard though, because they put you, these traditional religions, they put you in a position where if you don't agree with everything, then you have to, you're an apostate and you can't believe in anything. Yep. And I think that's why a lot of people hold on to these things, even if they know they're like, that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make any sense why we would discriminate against a person for just, that's who they are. Like, you just, I think inside almost everybody feels that's inherently unfair, but you're told that it's wrong. And so and I don't know, I just realized I was like, I'm okay not believing everything that I'm taught.
Yeah.
And that was for someone was raised to be somewhat black and white with things, like this was truth and this was not truth, and to be able to say, no, I don't have to accept that part of it. And that's okay. That's and so I don't know, it took me longer than it should have. I'll be honest. It did. But once I guess had that, my own reconciliation with God about that, and that, I was going to be able to, it was more important to me to love the people in my life than it was to believe this belief,
And
anyway.
I think that's great to hear. And I think a lot of people are that are steeped in religion and have been raised in strong religious households are uncomfortable with the uncomfortability and with, challenging what they've been taught, because there's an unknown there as to how, it's in a weird way, it's kind of, this is going to be a terrible metaphor, so forgive me, but it's similar to, like coming out, right? Like if you're challenging those beliefs, you don't know how people are going to respond. You don't know how your parents are going to respond, how the church is going to respond, what that's going to mean for you. And I think that what we see today is younger generations questioning that and pushing back on that. And that's, whether it's religion, whether it's politics, whether it's society, whether it's whatever it is, film, books, like that's how things change, and that's where growth happens. And so regardless of what path people take to get there, and what it looks like, just the fact that we're engaging in that discourse puts us in a better position than we were 10 years ago and 10 years prior to that. And I'm all for that.
Well, and it was interesting too. So the very first interview I had with somebody from my church after I had made this decision, and I was just like, I don't believe that. And they were like, okay. And I was like,
the inner turmoil that you've been dealing with. That's fascinating.
Yeah. But okay, so then we have this whole scene with them in Texas. He tells his dad's super cool. And then he starts to get, like, Alex starts to get fully invested in this as a relationship. And through this, and he says, that once the election's done, then we can go around Austin holding hands, and he says, I feel like I have a string tied to my chest that's to you,
pulling me towards you.
If there's a rope attached to my chest and it keeps pulling me towards you, which is like right almost verbatim out of Jane Eyre. There's and if you leave, I will bleed inwardly, Mr. Rochester says.
It's interesting.
If you go to Ireland with all that distance, I will bleed inwardly. Yeah.
I do think that's
classic rom-com.
It's classic rom-com, but then also to like quickly turn to that, like, I love you, I want to be with you, and like we can be open in all this, and like planning the future is also a very authentic thing that happens in a lot of relationships, where you start looking at it, you're like, this feels great, this feels comfortable, I want this, let's move to the next level. And relationship 101 really is make sure you're considering where the other person is at that point too. I'm saying this like I'm a pro as I sit here single, but it's it was very realistic to me to hear
Mhm.
that as well, where like,
Yeah.
here's where I'm at, and the other person to be like, whoa, 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 pump the brakes. Granted, typically in my experience, it's not pump the brakes. I'm part of the royal family and I have a lot to deal with, but it's realistic in this sense.
But yeah, I mean, that's why I thought it was such a brilliant story structure, because it just made his reticence so natural, where I think
Mhm.
in a lot of other situations it would be like, come on, this is 2023. It
Yeah.
it makes it work for the story.
I agree.
Mhm. And so then we have this we have a couple scenes where Alex is talking to Nora. He's so lovesick. And I thought that he did such a good job, that Taylor did such a good job with the lovesick. You're
Yeah.
just, oh, he, like, it was so good. I think in those scenes, you were just, it was bad. And then you have a scene with Henry talking to his sister and him saying, she says, do you love him? And what difference would it make if I did?
That one broke my heart. That
Yeah,
scene broke
tough.
my heart.
Yeah. And then I thought the acting in this scene where he comes to confront him, Alex comes to confront Henry, and I thought this back and forth was so well done. Like, it's hard for me to imagine. I give all the credit in the world to actors, because if you think about all of these lights and things, and like having to come up with this emotion out of nowhere, I think it would be so hard.
Absolutely.
It's brilliant what they do.
Yeah, that
And
was a great scene. He comes in
yeah.
all soking wet
Oh,
and it's just like, it's
I
wonderful.
literally stormed a castle for you.
And I think like this is where it starts getting into more, I won't say spoilery, but like we start getting into like, we're in the back, third act of the film here.
Yeah.
And
Well, it's a recap, so we're good.
Yeah.
But yeah, that Alex said, I mean, Henry says, for once, I wish you could see me for who I am and not who you want me to be, which it was a very good line, because I think we all want somebody who sees us for what we want to be, but you also want to be seen for and his trauma acknowledged, I think, is what he's just really scared. And he says that it doesn't make me a coward. It makes me a man with a shred of self-preservation.
As we're talking about this and as you're saying this, I'm starting to get emotional, and I'm realizing that this is where I was like broken open during the movie, and I was just a mess throughout through the end.
Yeah. And he's just like, and Alex is, the man that I loved is just all of a sudden out of my life with no explanation. So you feel for him too.
Yeah. Royal ghosting.
Yeah. Royal ghosting. And then it was so good. He says, you can live in your tower and nothing will ever happen to you. But there's the thing, nothing will ever happen to you. And he says, tell me to go and I will walk out this door and trouble you no longer. Oh, so good. So good.
The writing.
He's like, don't make me do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like they made Henry have, I don't know if they were using that like tear stuff or whatever, but he had to be like on the verge of crying for half of this movie.
Yeah, he really did play that internal trauma really well. Nicholas was very good. I was very impressed with both of their acting. But and then this sweet scene where he takes them to the museum and they dance. It was great.
Beautiful.
I promise I will be more brave. Oh, so good. Now
I'm gonna. Now I want to see it again.
Okay. Yes. So then Henry gives Alex his ring. And he says, I want you to have a piece of me when we can't be together. And I just thought they did this sort of like lovesick so well. You were just like, oh, like, I don't know how anybody would watch this and be like, they shouldn't be together.
There's
like,
a
what
few
is wrong with you.
Yeah, there's a few instances in this movie where they don't draw reference to it and they don't point it out, but where Henry is wearing Alex's sweatshirt at one point when he's taking him to the plane, when they're on the tarmac of the plane. Like,
I didn't even notice that.
Yeah, I actually didn't either. I saw someone point it out on something, and I was like, oh. They pointed it out from the trailers, by the way. So this is what fans are doing, is they're dissecting the trailers, saying, look, he's wearing that sweatshirt. but I thought that was a really good touch.
Yeah, that is good. Yeah. So then Zara gets, so then Alex gives the speech. Well, I guess I'm zipping ahead because the emails become hacked by this reporter guy. And so then Alex gives the speech, which was beautiful, about having been outed and the conformity of the closet, and we can
from the press room of the White House. That was my favorite part.
Yeah. And him talking about how much he loves Henry. He's like, I fell in love with someone who happens to be a man and happens to be the prince. Oh, it was so good. That was great. I mean, maybe they would get crowds from that speech. Maybe they would.
Let's go start the crowd,
so
Rachel.
Good. Yeah. And so then Zara gets Henry on the phone. So she has an emergency phone with Percy and or whatever that guy's name was. And she's like, if you don't, I don't care what all the stuffed shirts at Buckingham Palace say, you get him on. And then so then Henry gets the call and says, are you okay? I'm hanging in there. And then Alex says, are you okay? And he says, no, I'm not. I will be in London. I will break the sound barrier for you.
And then the very next scene, they're on the steps together,
Yeah.
like just hugging.
Come soon. So good. And we get this whole scene with the king meeting with Alex and Henry. And he says, your primary responsibility is to your country, not your heart. But then we see the crowds, and not just in London and not just at Buckingham Palace, but all over. They're gathering to support Henry, which was just so sweet. It was really good. And they both say that they love each other. So I love you more. And that's the movie. And
this
so
is a very
good.
subtle touch here, but there's because remind me, did they show the crowd outside the palace, or is it just in the reflection? I think it's just in reflection.
No, I think, don't they actually go out onto the
I was crying at that point, so I don't know.
I thought they actually go out onto the terrace and he waves and everything, but
I think they walked out. But there was the one thing I want to add is that there's been updates to the LGBTQ flag over the years, and they use the updated flag in this, and I thought just attention to detail, which it's more so just to recognize different sexualities, different identities, I should say. That's the correct way to say that. But also to recognize the challenges the community has had with Black and brown individuals over the years. And it was just really cool to see that update that started in Philadelphia actually years ago, which is interesting. But I love that touch. I was like, oh
yeah, that's good. Yeah. So that's the movie. It was outstanding. I give it 5 crowns on our 5 out of 5. I like, is it a perfect movie? No, but when it was pretty close. It was perfect in my heart.
It exceeded every expectation I had. And I had high expectations. It exceeded every expectation. So mine's like 5 buckets of tears out of 5.
Yes, and it's gonna be on Amazon. We're releasing this on the day that it gets released on Amazon, so you can check that out, and you won't want to miss it. It's excellent all the way around. And I hope that maybe once the strike is resolved, then maybe we can do that kind of I hope for some of these films that we'll get to maybe do some publicity and some other stuff, because I would love to talk to all the people involved with this.
Do you think, there's been rumors of this for a while, that a sequel book first, number 1 should happen, but number 2 will happen?
I was actually going to ask you about this because it is the struggle with all romantic comedies. Everybody always wants a sequel because you love the characters and you get invested, but it's so hard. I mean, it is very difficult to make a sequel work because what do you do next? The couple's already together. Yep. And so
you got to break them up.
You break them up, which sucks. And nobody wants to see the couple that they love, broken up, and that kind of conflict usually isn't interesting and is frustrating. Or you have them get married. You have like a big wedding movie / baby movie. Sometimes they'll do that. They'll have them have a baby. And usually those also aren't very good. So I don't know. I'm just like, no, perfect the way it is. No sequel.
Do I want it? Yes. I would love to explore these characters more. Do I think they should? No. Don't touch it. The book works just as it is. The story is about one of the best stories I've read in recent years. I mean, it was a page turner for me. It was so good. And the way that the movie adapted it was just on point. So don't touch it.
Yeah. I don't know. They could try, I guess, to make kind of a Harry and Meghan kind of plot maybe, but even that would suck. No, don't do it. Don't do it. Yeah. So there we go. Let us know if you think there should be a sequel. What's your great idea? Because we see it all the time. Like practically every good Hallmark movie, people are like, we want a sequel. We want a sequel. And I'm like, usually terrible. So
right.
Well, if people want to follow your content, how do they do that?
Yeah, guyatthemovies.com, Guy at the Movies on most socials, and also the Guy at the Movies podcast with my podcast partner, Sean from Math Teacher Movies every week, every Monday.
So much fun. Thanks so much for doing this. And you can find me at Rachel's Reviews, all of our social media, iTunes, YouTube, and on Rotten Tomatoes. Check that out. Also, make sure you're following the podcast, Hallmarkies Podcast, all of our social media. And I was kind of joking that this week has turned into like Pride Week for the Hallmarkies Podcast because we're also talking about Heartstopper season 2 will be coming up. So we'll look forward to that. So check that out. And if you are listening on iTunes, please leave your ratings and reviews. That really helps us a lot. 5 stars. And if you are watching on YouTube, please give the video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel. Most of our viewers are not subscribers. So if you're in that camp, please subscribe. It really helps us a lot. And we also have the patron group, which is a lot of fun, and the merch store. Check that out. And thanks again so much. And we'll talk to y'all later. Bye.
Thanks, Rachel.